Part 25. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 241. Chapter 241, My patience is limited, so I won't accompany you. The list for this banquet is all the ladies who attended the palace banquet last time, and Tianyu is also invited. Early in the morning, Tianyu was pulled up by his third daughter-in-law Pihan, who kept putting the clothes that had been prepared on Tianyu's body. Tianyu was originally very happy to be cleaned up by her mother, but when she looked in the mirror, the raised corners of her lips immediately deflated. "Mom, I'm going to a banquet, not a funeral. Even if it's still valid, there's no need to do this." When Tianyu thought of the day when he followed the third sister to the palace for the banquet, the princesses secretly laughed at her. Zolian quickly took out a pair of pearl flower earrings from the dressing box and stuffed them into his ears. "Be calm. Look at your third sister, isn't she also wearing plain clothes?" Pihan, the third daughter-in-law, snatched the earrings. "How can the third sister and I be the same? The third sister is naturally beautiful. If you look at me, after going to Huaishang for a while, it will be darker than our nursing home." Tianyu said that he was about to grab the earrings again, but was beaten mercilessly by his third daughter-in-law, Pihan. When Fan Qinjiao came in, he happened to see the scene and said with a smile, "Third sister-in-law, there is no need to be so deliberate. It's just an earring. Fourth sister likes to wear it." The third daughter-in-law, Pihan, sighed helplessly, "I'm just worried that being too showy may actually cause trouble. I heard that the third prince of Xianbei is also here today. What should I do if he takes a fancy to the heavenly decree? How can a daughter of the Hua family marry a murderer? If you really mean it, what does it have to do with what you wear? The marriage between Xianbei and Ziliang is not as simple as it seems. Ziliang has a plan, and so does Xianbei. Besides, the third prince of Xianbei is cunning and greedy for profit. He will never choose a prince and concubine based on appearance alone." After hearing this, the third daughter-in-law Pihan handed the earrings to Tianyu. "Your third sister is right, my mother is too worried, but you must remember to follow your third sister closely. Don't be impulsive. If something happens, you don't have to worry about yourself, but you must protect your third sister, do you hear me?" Tianyu's eyes widened in disbelief. "Are you still my mother?" The third daughter-in-law Pihan reached out and poked Tianyu's head. "If your third sister is safe, you will definitely be safe. If something happens to your third sister, even if you are alive, it will be in vain." Tianlu. This is really clearly disgusted. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Tao Yuxian stood at the door of the house with the daughters-in-law of the Hua family. Fan Qinjiao took Tianyu into the carriage, looked at his grandmother's lips that were still about to speak, and said softly, "Grandma, don't worry, I will bring Tianyu back safely." If Lu Gan was smart, he should know that everything about the Hua family was her bottom line. Of course, if he is stupid, she is willing to send him on his way. The mansion in the western suburbs was originally on the back street of the main city, and the streets were crowded at noon. By the time the carriage arrived at the Zhou mansion of the Minister of Revenue, an hour had already passed. At this time, there were many carriages parked outside the gate of Zhou mansion, and many official ladies were walking inside together. Tianyu got off the carriage and said in surprise, "It seems that there weren't so many official ladies at the Sun Palace banquet, right?" Fan Qinjiao silently glanced at the rows of carriages parked on both sides of the streets of Zhou mansion, his dark eyes concealing sharpness. Xianbei was defeated, but he did not really bow to Ziliang. Therefore, although the candidate for marriage cannot reach the level of a princess, it is not lower than that of a noble lady. These so-called ladies from famous families are probably nothing more than a cover-up for thoughtful people. After all, there are many people with mixed opinions, so if you do something bad, people will not find it out so quickly. And it can spread quickly after certain dirty purposes are achieved. Fan Qinjiao calmly led Tianyu up the steps, but even though he was calm, he was already very energetic. Before coming, she just thought of a hypothesis, but now it seems that everything is just her guess. Tianyu didn't know what his third sister was thinking. It was rare for him to go out to relax, so he looked at everything he caught curiously. The Zhou mansion is not too big, and after following the maid who led the way into the hanging flower gate, they arrived at the backyard after walking a few steps. Looking around, there are flowers in bloom, and nearly half of the official ladies in the main city are gathered in twos and threes everywhere, especially around the princesses, who are even more crowded. As Fan Qinjiao and Tianyu walked in, the backyard, which was originally full of laughter, instantly became quiet. Fan Qinjiao looked at the faces that showed no kindness at all, especially the flames erupting from the eyes of the princesses, as if he was seeing a battlefield without smoke. It is probably impossible to start well and end well today. Zhao Jianjia sat in the pavilion and watched the scene coldly, feeling indescribably excited. The reason why there is today's banquet is because Fan Qinjiao's marriage with Xianbei failed. Everyone present knew very well that today was the day to find a new marriage partner for the third prince of Xianbei. I really didn't expect that Princess Jingping is here too. Could it be that she is here to help the third prince of Xianbei choose a marriage partner? After all, Princess Jingping and the third prince of Xianbei were almost accused of marriage before. Even if they know each other, it is reasonable. Zhao Jianjia pretended to be surprised and said something to himself, which directly aroused the anger in everyone's hearts. If Fan Qinjiao agreed to the marriage, where would we be now? Especially those princesses with similar status to Fan Qinjiao, they really want to kick Fan Qinjiao out? Princess Yangming, who was sitting opposite Zhao Jianjia, stood up and pointed angrily at Fan Qinjiao and said, "What are you doing here? Are you here to see our jokes?" Tianyu frowned and was about to speak, but Fan Qinjiao held her hand and smiled without changing his face. "I'm going to come from the Zhou mansion's invitation. I heard that this banquet was personally ordered by the emperor. The little girl of the Hua family, I don't dare to resist the emperor's wishes, but hearing what Princess Yangming means, Princess Yangming seems to dare? Princess Yangming. Her, of course she wouldn't dare." Zhao Jianjia knew that Fan Qinjiao was sharp-tongued, so he stood up and pulled Princess Yangming to persuade her. Even if Princess Jingping has just been canonized, she is still a princess personally ennobled by the emperor. Why should there be tit-for-tat confrontation if several of the present are princesses? It seemed like he was trying to persuade him kindly, but in fact he was saying that Fan Qinjiao's name was not worthy of his real name. Tianyu is about to explode. This is clearly fanning the flames. Sure enough, Princess Yangming sneered and said, "Princess? Is she worthy? But even a picked-up princess dares to compare with our hereditary princess. It makes everyone else laugh." The surrounding princesses, who had long held grudges against Fan Qinjiao, all looked sarcastic when they heard this. Other official ladies also covered their lips with handkerchiefs and smiled softly. Zhao Jianjia curled her lips proudly, turned her head and looked outside the pavilion, expecting Fan Qinjiao's red and white expression, but when she looked over, she was stunned. I saw Fan Qinjiao turning around and walking out of the garden with Tianyu. From beginning to end, there was no wave on that cold face. The eldest lady of the Zhou family, Zhou Ningxi, was sitting in the pavilion with the other princesses. She saw Fan Qinjiao leaving without even saying hello. Where could she sit still? Zhou Ningxi, who got up and hurriedly caught up with Fan Qinjiao, said hurriedly, "Where are you going, Princess Jingping?" Fan Qinjiao looked calm and said, "I'm going back home." Zhou Ningxi frowned, not believing that Fan Qinjiao really drove him away. Princess Jingping also said that today's banquet is not only the intention of our Zhou family, but also the order of the emperor. Princess Jingping said so and left. "Go, aren't you afraid that the emperor will blame you later?" Fan Qinjiao smiled when he heard this. "I think this is the first time for Miss Zhou to help her parents prepare a banquet." It is inevitable that even the quarrels and conflicts in her daughter's family cannot be handled well. I dare not resist the emperor's will. However, as the emperor's own princess, I was ridiculed and ridiculed by an unknown official daughter. I will report this matter to the emperor. I believe that the emperor, with his profound understanding and righteousness, will understand the reason for my leaving today. The words of praise and disparagement left everyone in the yard with bruises on their faces. No one expected that Fan Kinjao would not even care about his own face and leave the table with such a broken face in front of everyone. Fan Kinjao, how dare she? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 242. Chapter 242. The same surname is Fan. The yard became quiet again. Those official ladies who were still laughing at Fan Kinjao were now scared to death, let alone laughing. If Fan Kinjao leaves like this, then the news that they snubbed Fan Kinjao today is bound to spread throughout the main city. The Xianbei people are still in the main city now. If a joke is really made, there is no need to lose their face. Zhou Ningxi was really scared. He was sweating like mud and his fingertips were cold. Princess Jingping, calm down your anger. Everything is my negligence. I hope Princess Jingping will not remember the faults of others. If today's incident is really spread, not only her, but also her father will be blamed. Princess Jingping, just let it go as soon as you see fit. Don't worry about trivial matters. Princess Yangming raised her cheeks and frowned impatiently. Fan Kinjao followed the sound and looked at Princess Yangming, still smiling like a spring breeze. Princess Yangming is really good-tempered, even if she was instigated by a little official lady, she can still be like this. Compared with Princess Yangming's vast power, I certainly feel ashamed. Everyone was stunned when they heard this. Read what Fan Kinjao said at the beginning, and then carefully review what Fan Kinjao just said. Soon, all eyes in the courtyard fell on Zhao Jianjia. It is true that everyone was hostile to Fan Kinjao, but no one said it openly. If Princess Yangming had not stood up, everyone would not have been held tightly by Fan Kinjao. And before Princess Yangming stood up, the young lady from the Zhao family seemed to have really said something unpleasant. If we really want to investigate it carefully, even their fathers can't control the marriage. How could Princess Jingping turn things around? To put it bluntly, Princess Jingping was forced to come out just like them. For Xianbei to choose from. Zhao Jianjia was sweating all over as the pairs of eyes staring at her in the yard made her eyes wander. I thought I could rest easy by hiding behind Princess Yangming, but in the end, I was caught out by Fan Kinjao. At this time, Princess Yangming also looked extremely bad. Looking at Zhao Jianjia coldly for a while, he suddenly raised his hand and slapped him. Snap dash. He slapped Zhao Jianjia with all his strength until he fell off the stone bench. Princess Yangming didn't owe anything at all, but instead shouted, "Why don't you hurry up and apologize to Princess Jingping? When did Zhao Jianjia, who has always been held in high esteem by others, ever suffer such injustice? But now she has to endure it even if she doesn't want to. No matter how highly she is praised by others, she is still just a young lady. How does she compare with the princesses present?" With everyone's attention, Zhao Jianjia stood up slowly, covering her red and swollen cheeks, and walked in front of Fan Kinjao. Her reluctance to lower her head was not too obvious. "I'm sorry." Fan Kinjao glanced slightly sideways and looked at Zhao Jianjia aside. "I wonder who this unknown lady is." Zhao Jianjia. She doesn't believe that Fan Kinjao doesn't know her. Tianyu reacted quickly and quickly took over the words. "I'm afraid the third sister has forgotten that our family once almost got married to the Zhao family. It was this young lady from the Zhao family and our eldest brother, but the eldest brother was disappointed when they met. At the end of the day, this marriage is over." Hearing this, the people in the courtyard realized that the Hua family and the Zhao family still had such disputes. Now everyone is more certain that Zhao Jianjia deliberately provoked Princess Yangming and almost made all of them take the blame. Zhao Jianjia, who was originally waiting to see Fan Qingjiao's blushing face, now turned to his own face. Zhou Ningxi thought that Zhao Jianjia would cause trouble, and planned to have a close friendship with him. Now, Zhou Ningxi took the initiative to stand a few steps next to Zhao Jianjia, then looked at Fan Qingjiao and said with a smile, "The banquet will be held soon. Princess Jingping and Princess Rong'an should stop standing in the sun and hurry up, go sit in the pavilion. Since the Xianbei people are in the Zhou family, Fan Qingjiao will not destroy his prestige and make others laugh." Besides, she still couldn't grasp the meaning of hosting this banquet. If she really left with Tianyu rashly, it would be a disaster. Fan Qingjiao didn't like things that were beyond his control, so he didn't violate Zhou Ningxi's invitation and followed her towards the pavilion not far away. Zhao Jianjia was left standing alone, staring at the sun above her head, not wanting to go or not. Princess Yangming was no better than Zhao Jianjia. She was isolated in the pavilion next to her. Everyone was hiding as far away as possible for fear of being led into the ditch again by this brainless person. After the commotion just now, everyone in the yard wanted to get closer to Fan Qingjiao. When making friends, you have to make friends with smart people. Otherwise, how sad would it be to have someone like Princess Yangming who uses herself as a cannon? Princess Yangming. She has stopped talking, why are you still looking at her? Soon, the back garden was divided into two groups. One group is Fan Qingjiao, who is sitting steadily in the pavilion with the oracle. One group is the people around who are intimidated. Although everyone wants to be friends with Fan Qingjiao, when they think of Fan Qingjiao's mouth, it's like he's been poisoned. A figure suddenly walked openly to the pavilion where Fan Qingjiao was. Under the gaze of everyone, his voice was bright and authentic. "What happened today is that we are all narrow-minded. I hope Princess Jingping will not take it to heart. In fact, when everyone complains about Princess Jingping, they are more envious and jealous. After all, everyone has no control over the marriage, and no one can be as lucky as Princess Jingping." The open words expressed everyone's thoughts. Tianyu looked at the woman in front of him and asked suspiciously, "Are you Princess Yunnan, the daughter of King Rui?" Princess Yunnan was stunned for a moment, and then she said with a guilty conscience, "Is it because of my father that County Princess Rong'an doesn't want to be friends with me?" Tianyu quickly waved his hand, "No way, I just didn't expect you to take the initiative to talk to me and my third sister." Although Tianyu didn't know how King Rui died, she also knew that he and the Hua family didn't deal with him when he was there. Especially during the period when King Rui died, there were rumors in the main city that the Hua family secretly killed him. King Rui. How can the younger generation have control over the affairs of the elders? Besides, my father has passed away now, Princess Yunnan said, sitting next to Tianyu, and took the initiative to get the fruit on the stone table for Tianyu. Seeing that it was hard to shirk Tianyu, he smiled and started chatting with Princess Yunnan. When other people in the yard saw this, they also took the opportunity to come over. For a time, Fan Qingjiao became the object of admiration from all the stars. There were only two figures standing under the tree looking at the crowded pavilion not far away. One is Yan Hanbei, the daughter of a cabinet scholar, and the other is Pan Yulu, the daughter of the deputy envoy of the General Affairs Department. Pan Yulu thought Princess Jingping was very smart. Should we go over and have a look too? Yan Hanbei has a straightforward temperament. He glanced at the pavilion coldly and said, but he is also a guy who likes to be praised and bragged. What's so good about him? Pan Yulu was helpless. I'm afraid there will be no more people in the main city and your eyes. Yan Hanbei smiled mysteriously, nonsense, she will come back after a while, and then I will show you what a real hibiscus from clear water is, naturally carved. You mean? Pan Yulu was stunned. I remember that the person you mentioned is also named Fan, right? Yan Hanbei snorted disdainfully, they both have the same surname of Fan, but the difference is huge. Panula. It's whatever you say. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 243. Chapter 243. The fox's tail cannot be hidden. Several factions are faintly divided in the back garden. Although everyone wanted to resolve the awkward atmosphere with Fan Kinjao, they didn't really want to get too close. Everyone stood in the pavilion chatting for a while, and then gathered together again in twos and threes. On the contrary, Princess Yunnan has been sitting next to Fan Kinjao and has no intention of getting up and leaving. Fan Kinjao was not a talkative person to begin with. Princess Yunnan just talked about all kinds of things with Tianyu. One moment, she was talking about the popular makeup for women in the main city, and the next moment, she was talking about whose young lady was going on a blind date. Whose young master's words were completely devoid of any specificity. After talking about it, Tianyu's earrings were finally mentioned again. The earrings of County Master Rongan are unique and tight. I don't know where they were made. I will have a pair made for me tomorrow, but it's just that Lord Rongan, don't mind if I wear the same one as you. I say that because I really like it. Tianyu touched his ears unnaturally and said with a smile, you can hit him if you like. I don't mind that much. Princess Yunnan smiled and hugged Tianyu's arm. Those who say that girls from your Hua family have bad personalities are really blind. I think both Princess Rongan and Princess Jingping are the same. It's easy to get along with. Tianyu smiled happily and took Princess Yunnan to talk about other things. Others watching the scene did not expect that King Rui had looked down on the Hua family for so many years, but in the end, Princess Yunnan became so close to the Hua family's little daughters. Not long after, Zhou Ningxi slowly stood up and led the ladies in the back garden towards the banquet hall. Princess Yunnan realized that she had forgotten her handkerchief in the pavilion when she was halfway there. She hurriedly went back to get it by herself. Tianyu walked up to his third sister and said in a low voice, "Third sister, there is something wrong with Princess Yunnan." Fan Kinjao looked at Tianyu silently without making a sound. Tianyu paused and then said, "Although I am not biased against the title of King Rui's daughter, there were rumors throughout the main city that King Rui's death was related to our Hua family. I heard that King Rui loved this girl very much during his lifetime. As a princess, I don't think this princess really doesn't mind at all, and besides." Tianyu touched his earrings and said, "My father bought these earrings from a fleeing merchant when he was away at war. They are completely made of polished jade. Even an inexperienced person like me knows they are worthless. I just wanted to leave it in my mind, but Princess Yunnan praised her so much that I felt like digging my toes into the ground. Tianyu has really matured and become more stable. Huishang's line is correct this time. Only by experiencing the storm can one become more thoughtful and smooth." Fan Kinjao held Tianyu's hand and whispered, "Princess Yunnan is indeed suspicious, but since she hasn't shown her tail yet, you shouldn't alert the snake." After speaking for a while, Fan Kinjao inadvertently put a small porcelain bottle into Tianyu's palm, and exerted force with his 5 fingers, forcing Tianyu to put it away carefully. Everything depends on the situation. Tianyu just felt that Princess Yunnan's starting point was wrong. He never expected that the third sister would be so cautious. Seeing that the third sister's dark eyes were not joking, Tianyu quickly hid the small porcelain bottle in his sleeve. The banquet hall has already been decorated. To avoid suspicion, the male and female guests sat on 2 sides, separated by a screen with hundreds of birds facing the phoenix. It's just that although the screen does not seem to be completely opaque, it is also extremely hazy. The 2 guests sitting on the left and right sides can only vaguely see the moving figures of people, but the rest of their bodies cannot be seen at all. Everyone present today knew clearly that the so-called banquet was just to find a new marriage partner for the third prince of Xianbei. But now not only are the male and female guests separated, but a screen is used as a shield at the only banquet where they meet. So and so. If the third prince of Xianbei can still see who is who, then Fan Qinjiao would really admire him. I'm afraid that the marriage partner has been secretly finalized. And now everything. It's just a cover. Fan Qinjiao's eyes were extremely serious, and his heart was cold. It would be fine if everything today had nothing to do with the Hua family. If it was as she guessed, then everyone involved would not be able to escape unscathed. Anyone who steps on her bottom line will never stop fighting. Princess Yunnan ran back in a hurry and sat down next to Tianyu as expected. After burning the incense, the female guests had already sat down, and footsteps were heard from the other side of the screen. The person who spoke that day was Zhou Chun, the Minister of Rites, saying, "His Royal Highness the Prince's humble abode has really brought glory to the Zhou mansion." Bailey Fengming smiled calmly and said, "The Minister of Rites' words are serious." Third Prince Bailey Rongs pointed to the seat in the middle and said, "Prince, please take a seat." Bailey Fengming nodded slightly and sat on the main seat first, followed by others. The ladies present did not expect that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince and the Third Prince were both here. Everyone who was originally in low spirits immediately cheered up with their heads held high. Soon, it will be the day when the Emperor chooses the brides for the princes of the right age. How can the ladies present not be eager to try? As long as you leave a good impression on His Highness the Crown Prince or the Third Prince today, your chances of winning will be greater when the list is submitted to the palace. Fan Qinjiao was not surprised by Bailey Fengming's arrival. Xianbei and Ziliang are getting married, and the two countries are tentatively on good terms. The Prince of Ziliang will attend the marriage banquet of the three princes of Xianbei. People will feel that the royal family of Ziliang treats others with courtesy, and Xianbei will also appreciate Ziliang's good attitude and put it on his face. Regarding Jin's affairs, the man in the palace has always been very positive. Just the reason for Bailey Rong's arrival is very interesting to study. A prince of neither high nor low can come to the marriage banquet of the third prince of Xianbei. Who would believe it if there is no profit? There was another sound from the other side of the screen, which seemed to be the arrival of the third prince of Xianbei and the vassal king. Fan Qinjiao followed the sound and looked up at the screen, but he bumped into Bailey Fengming. Even through the screen, you can still clearly see the straight robe on Bailey Fengming's body, which is as white as snow and spotless as always. In the blur, Fan Qinjiao noticed Bailey Fengming gently nodding. Obviously, he was looking at her too. Such a calm look was the same as that day in the morning hall. Remembering the absurdity of the morning hall, Fan Qinjiao instantly withdrew his eyes and then looked away calmly. Little did he know that the base of her ears had already turned red. Bailey Fengming looked at the movements of the figure behind the screen, smiled and then looked away. He came here today not just for the love of his children. The banquet begins, with singing and dancing. The Zhou family really spent a lot of money this time, and even invited the most famous dancer in the main city. On the left side of the screen, the men were chatting and being polite, while on the right side of the screen, the daughter's family was laughing and chatting, a rare joy. Ah! A scream suddenly sounded. Everyone followed the sound and saw a maid pouring watermelon juice to relieve the heat on Tianyu's body. Tianyu was fine, but Princess Yunnan, who was sitting next to Tianyu, screamed in shock. Fan Qinjiao lowered his head to check the heavenly decree, but where are the injuries? Tianyu shook his head, "It's okay, but I'm afraid I can't wear these clothes anymore." The maid quickly knelt on the ground and begged for mercy, "It's all my fault. Please forgive me, Princess Rongan." Zhou Ningxi stood up and walked over, "The courtyard where I live is not far from here. Princess Rongan, please come with me to change clothes." Tianyu looked at Fan Qinjiao subconsciously. Fan Qinjiao has already stood up, "I will go with you." When the other ladies saw this, they also said, In that case, let's go with you. There is a male guest next door. Who doesn't want to take this opportunity to highlight himself as a kind person? Zhou Ningxi was in a dilemma. This is not a big deal, but if so many people are following her, doesn't it mean that she doesn't treat guests well? Princess Yunnan suddenly said. As soon as Princess Jingping left, everyone present was panicked. Why don't I accompany Princess Rong'an to change clothes? Fan Qinjiao wanted to continue speaking, but Princess Yunnan was the first to kick the maid who was kneeling on the ground. You don't have eyes, get out of here. You are just waiting here to make people look bad. Beat him to death with a stick. The maid stood up in panic and ran out in a hurry. Since Princess Yunnan is kind, I'll trouble Princess Yunnan. Tianyu looked at his third sister with a smile and said, Third sister, don't worry, I can do it myself. Fan Qinjiao took a deep look at Tianyu before sitting back on his seat. Following Tianyu, Princess Yunnan and Zhou Ningxi left the banquet hall. Fan Qinjiao's hands under his sleeves were clenched as Tianyu left. The heavenly decree should have been understood. That's why I want to take the risk. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 244. Chapter 244. The mantis stalks the cicada, but the oriole follows behind. Tianyu, accompanied by Princess Yunnan, followed Zhou Ningxi to the backyard of the Zhou family. Zhou Ningxi's yard is not big, and apart from the main house there is only one wing. Now the servants in the mansion are busy with the banquet in the main courtyard, but no one is quiet in the courtyard. Zhou Ningxi introduced Tianyu into the room, handed over the dress, then turned around and walked out. Even if they are from the daughter's house, they still don't know each other, so they have to avoid suspicion. Princess Yunnan, who was also standing at the door, exclaimed, Oh, why is my earring missing? Zhou Ningxi was also surprised. Princess Yunnan, think about it carefully, but where did it fall? Princess Yunnan touched her empty ears and vowed, it was there when I left the banquet hall, but it's gone now. I guess it was dropped on the way here. Zhou Ningxi only felt mentally and physically exhausted. Today was the first time she helped her father host a banquet, but things happened one after another. Even if Princess Yunnan didn't say that the earrings were stolen, it would definitely affect the Zhou family's reputation once word got out. That earring was bought for me by my father before he was alive. I have always cherished it and wanted to keep it as a memory, but now. Princess Yunnan's eyes turned red as she spoke. Princess Yunnan, there is no need to worry, I will personally accompany Princess Yunnan to look for it, but... Zhou Ningxi was worried about what to do with County Princess Rong'an in the house after she left, but she saw a little maid passing by outside the courtyard. Zhou Ningxi hurriedly called the people in and told him to wait for the Lord Rong'an to come out before sending him back to the banquet hall first. The little maid hurriedly knelt down and said, Don't worry, young lady, I know this. Zhou Ningxi then walked out of the courtyard with Princess Yunnan. Just as Princess Yunnan walked out of the yard, she inadvertently looked back at the little maid standing at the door. The four eyes face each other. The little maid nodded lightly without knowing anything. Not long after, Tianyu, who had changed his clothes, walked out of the house. The little maid said with anxious eyes red, Princess Yunnan just left with our young lady. Our young lady originally came back as she promised, but she has never been seen. Princess Rong'an, please do a good job and stay with me. Shall we go find Miss together? Tianyu frowned and saw that there was really no one around, so he followed the little maid out of the yard. But as I followed the little maid all the way, not only did I go further and further off, I couldn't even hear the sound of silk and bamboo in the banquet hall. Tianyu stopped cautiously, Where is your lady? The little maid turned back and pointed to the room not far away. I saw that the young lady went there with Princess Rong'an. Tianyu squeezed the small porcelain bottle in his sleeve and asked with a sneer, It only takes me a cup of tea to change my clothes. If you really followed your lady here, How could you rush back to the yard before I changed my clothes? Or to say that you are simply lying. After finishing his words, Tianyu turned around and wanted to leave. A figure suddenly and silently stopped in front of Tianyu. Tianyuben's defensive eyes widened. It's you. In the Zhou family's banquet hall, Fan Qingjiao's dark eyes were cold and intimidating. How could a person who could really tolerate someone who was at odds with his own family speak harshly to a maid? No matter how innocent and harmless Princess Yunnan pretended to be, her shortcomings were finally exposed. Princess Yunnan first deliberately tried to please her, and then unexpectedly lured Tianyu into a trap. Everything seemed to be seamless. It's just that Princess Yunnan alone would not have such a big list to dare to join forces with the third prince of Xianbei alone, but if Bailey Rongs is there to connect the dots, everything will be a matter of course. Although Tianyu is the head of the county, she is the daughter of the Hua family. Once Tianyu married Xianbei, not only did Xianbei seize the weakness of the Hua family, but Bailey Rongs, who secretly joined forces with Xianbei, was able to use Tianyu to blackmail her and even the Hua family. What's more, Bailey Rongs dared to join forces with Xianbei even though he was in his position. It was obvious that he had his back against a big tree to enjoy the shade. And this person can only be a man with high authority in the palace. As long as Tianyu marries Xianbei, he is both the spy of Ziliang and the weakness of the Hua family. How could that man not figure it out if he achieves so many things with one stone? So Fan Qingjiao was right, those people had already set their sights on Tianyu. The rage in his heart seemed to burn Fan Qingjiao to ashes, and his clenched fingers were already deep in his palms. Such hatred burning the blood could not be quelled even by chewing through the gums. What a third prince of Xianbei! What a Bailey Rongs! What a king! The time of flashing a stick of incense passed quietly, and the heavenly edict has not returned yet. Fan Qingjiao lowered his eyes slightly, holding on to the overwhelming hatred in his heart, then stood up and looked at the maid aside and said quietly, "I wonder where the place to clean your hands is." The maid pointed to the northwest outside the door. "Princess Jingping, do you need a servant to lead the way?" Fan Qingjiao shook his head and quietly left the table while everyone's eyes were still focused on the dancer. The medicine hidden in Tianyu's sleeve is colorless and odorless, but the medicine bottle is stained with ivy juice that Fan Qingjiao specially left. Ivy has a sweet and bitter taste. The taste of ivy is not special, but the bitter taste will not be masked by any flavor. Fan Qingjiao walked around the backyard where Zhou Ningxi lived, looking for the smell of ivy, and walked quickly deeper into Zhou's mansion. Bailey Rongs went to such great lengths to join forces with Princess Yunnan, of course, not simply because he wanted Princess Yunnan to persuade Tianyu to marry to Xianbei, but to make Tianyu agree to go to Xianbei, and even more so for Hua. There is only one way to make a family appointment. Destroy Tianyu's innocence. Fan Qingjiao's mind was spinning. When she came out, she saw that the third prince of Xianbei and Bailey Rongs had not left the table. So she still has time to turn things around. Clenched his teeth, suppressing the overwhelming anger and hatred in his heart, Fan Qingjiao's eyes were already as cold as ice. Today, no one can escape unscathed. A figure suddenly settled behind Fan Qingjiao. When Fan Qingjiao noticed someone approaching, he turned around and flicked his sleeves, and a burst of fragrance instantly dispersed. Xiaoxian was stunned when he was about to speak. His throat suddenly became dry and itchy, as if millions of ants were gnawing at his neck. Fan Qingjiao didn't expect that the person coming was Xiaoxian, so he quickly took out the needle pack from his arms. 3 silver needles were clamped between the fingers and pierced into Xiaoxian's already red and swollen neck. Xiaoxian felt a chill rush into his throat, and soon the life-threatening itching finally subsided completely. "Thank you, Miss Qingjiao, for not killing, for saving your life." Xiaoxian, who was kneeling on one knee, felt his face flush. The dignified young master of the East Palace also had a day where he didn't even know how he died. Just thinking about it makes me feel embarrassed to see anyone. Fan Qingjao frowned and lowered his eyes. Why are you here? Xiao Xian stood up awkwardly and pointed to a thatched cottage not far away. Your Highness has been waiting for Miss Qingjao for a long time. Fan Qingjao was just observing Lu Qian and Bailey Rongs, but he didn't know that Bailey Fengming had already left the table. If it were anyone else, Fan Qingjao would never believe it, but when he thought that Xiao Xian was Bailey Fengming's confidant, Fan Qingjao pursed his lips, turned around and walked towards the thatched cottage not far away. Before she could reach out to push the door open, the person inside opened the door a crack. Fan Qingjao stepped in and saw Bailey Fengming standing by the window. Your sister is quite impatient. Divine decree? Fan Qingjao walked quickly to the window and looked out, finally seeing Tianyu, who was safe and sound. At this time, Tianyu was squatting under a low wall in the opposite room. Due to the problem of sight, Tianyu was well hidden. If Fan Qingjao hadn't been standing by the window facing the low wall, it would have been difficult to find him. What's going on? Fan Qingjao turned to look at Bailey Fengming beside him. Xiao Xian blocked it, and Tianyu was safe. Unless she was really stupid, she wouldn't have been able to see that all this was Bailey Fengming's plan. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 245. Chapter 245. Old tastes like old ginger. Bailey Fengming glanced sideways slightly. The smile on his face was light but straight into people's hearts. His dark eyes were full of her figure. My father suddenly sent someone to hold a banquet at Zhou's house, and even mentioned that the 3 emperor brothers would also attend. Now the 3 emperor brothers are focused on the position of the prince. I won't waste my time on other things. So, what happened today was indeed promoted and even planned by Bailey Rongs. Fan Qingjao frowned. Did the emperor tell you personally? Bailey Fengming smiled calmly. I found it. Since hearing the news, Bailey Fengming felt that something was not right, so he asked someone to check it out. Unexpectedly, they actually found something. The 3rd emperor brother secretly and Princess Yunnan secretly contacted the 3rd prince of Xianbei. Since they join forces, the purpose is the same. Brother 3 emperors and Princess Yunnan both hate a few people. After a little elimination and then comparing the list of young ladies at today's banquet, their purpose will be obvious. Bailey Fengming stared at the distance not far away. Fan Qingjiao's faint smile is sincere and warm. He said these words easily, but Fan Qingjio knew in his heart that it would take a lot of effort to find out. If Bailey Rongs dared to join forces with Xianbei to scheme against the Hua family in such a big way, he must have already received the support of that person, but that person had absolutely no reason to truthfully tell Bailey Fengming about the matter. Unless. Fan Qingjio looked at that handsome face and said word by word, you have someone in front of you. Bailey Fengming did not deny it and nodded without hesitation. Fan Qingjio's clenched palms were covered with a layer of dense sweat. Those who can serve in front of the emperor are the emperor's confidants, and even those who can risk life and death for the emperor. These people have been carefully selected by the emperor for many years and tested many times before they can be reused. The man in the palace is particularly suspicious and sensitive. If he were not someone he completely trusted, he would never be able to live in front of the emperor. But even Yu Jian, who was as airtight as an iron barrel, was punched with holes by Bailey Fengming. Who would have thought that the prince, who seemed to be the most aloof from the world, had already secretly penetrated the royal palace? Outside the door, there was suddenly the sound of slight footsteps. Bailey Fengming glanced sideways at the window, then hooked his hand at Zhizao. Come here. The reason why Fan Qingjio chased after her was because she didn't intend to let go of today's events, but the appearance of Bailey Fengming disrupted all her plans. Seeing that she was standing still, Bailey Fengming said again, if you don't come, you will miss it. Fan Qingjio frowned and walked to the window suspiciously, when he saw a figure walking out of the house opposite. It's the maid who deceived Fan Qingjio to come here before. The maid quietly walked to the low wall where Tianyu was, seemed to say a few words to Tianyu, and then ran towards the banquet hall with a look of panic. "She is yours." Fan Qinjiao was really surprised. Bailey Fengming stood behind Fan Qinjiao, staring at the thin figure in front of him, and said softly, "So be it." Fan Qinjiao looked back suspiciously. Bailey Fengming smiled and explained, "A few days ago, my mother made a special trip to the Zhou mansion." Fan Qinjiao understood instantly. No matter what reason Queen Zhen 11 came to the Zhou mansion, the Zhou mansion could not turn her away, and Queen Zhen 11, who had already been prepared, could take the opportunity to secretly bribe the maids of the Zhou mansion. Princess Yunnan traveled frequently with the young lady of the Zhou family in the early years. The queen only needed to inquire a little to find out which of the maids around Miss Zhou's family were familiar with Princess Yunnan. Fan Qinjiao did not expect that this matter had nothing to do with the Zhou family. Everything was arranged by Princess Yunnan and Bailey Rongs. As for how Queen Zhengzi bribed these maids, it is even simpler. Princess Yunnan's bribery of them was temptation, while Queen Zhengzi's bribery was coercion. No one dares to disobey the queen's wishes, unless they can do so without caring about the lives of their family members. Sure enough, is still spicy. The queen's methods are really amazing. It seems that Bailey Fengming has made all the arrangements this time, and there is no need for her to take action anymore. A warm breeze blew by, making the doors and windows of the thatched cottage rattle. The surrounding area has long been abandoned by the Zhou family. Princess Yunnan knew that no outsiders would come to disturb her, so she set the location here. Compared with the hut opposite, this thatched hut is even more dilapidated. Especially the windows without window paper, which may collapse at any time. Bailey Fengming stretched out his hand to support the broken window frame, and leaned in the direction of Fan Qinjiao involuntarily. His other hand was supported on the wall, and his long figure hugged Fan Qinjiao. Harika was completely trapped in her chest. Fan Qinjiao's back was pressed tightly against Bailey Fengming's steadily beating chest, and she could clearly feel his body temperature seeping into her body bit by bit through her clothes. Even his breath is filled with the unique purple fragrance of his body. The path outside the window was quiet, and Bailey Fengming's deep voice suddenly sounded in my ears, "Father has agreed to let me accept the Huaishang mine. After escorting the Xianbei group back to Xianbei, I will set off directly to Huaishang. Is there anything you need me to bring to the Hua family's major generals?" Fan Qinjiao suppressed his pounding heartbeat and said softly, "No need." She had already decided to set off with the team escorting Xianbei, so that she could pass by Huaishang in a legitimate manner. It's not that she can't trust Bailey Fengming, but there are some things she wants to say to her uncles in person. Bailey Fengming looked at the slightly red ears on his lips, and did not force it. He just paused and said, "So, have you considered my last proposal carefully?" Fan Qinjiao's heartbeat, which had just been steady, suddenly became chaotic again. It's just that time can't change her decision. Her family is displaced, her family is in turmoil, her revenge has not been avenged, and her kindness has not been repaid. Not to mention that she doesn't want to talk about her children's personal affairs. Even if she really wants to, where does she have the face to do it? Everything she has endured in this life has been paid for by her past stupidity. She moves steadily and cautiously, with foresight, and every step is planned in advance. In all the plans, the words Bailey Fengming never existed. The warmth behind her was still wrapping around her whole body, but Fan Qinjiao moved his lips slightly and blurted out the words of rejection. A pair of figures hurriedly came into view. It was the maidservant who came in a hurry with Lu Gan. The maid pointed to the wooden house not far away, as if she was reporting something to Lu Gan. There seemed to be a flash of excitement in Lu Gan's eyes, and Lu Gan stepped in after the maid pushed the door open. At the same time, Tianyu, who had been hiding under the low wall, opened the small porcelain bottle that Fan Qinjiao had given her before and poured all the powder inside along the worn window paper. Lu Gan, who had already entered the house, sensed something was wrong and suddenly bumped towards the window. His angry red eyes were staring at Tianyu, and the hand that stretched out the window seemed to want to strangle Tianyu to death before he would stop. Tianyu Reo was confident in his third sister's medicine, but he was still so scared that he covered his mouth and took a few steps back. But before Lu Gan could get out of the window, his consciousness became heavier and heavier. The darkness enveloped him instantly without any struggle. Soon, Lu Gan got into the wooden house. Tianyu stood there and waited for a while, then stood on tiptoe and looked into the window, and then called the maid who was standing aside. The two of them said a few more words, and then the maid left in a hurry. Tianyu hid under the low wall again. Bailey Fengming looked at the weird Tianyu and smiled lightly. This sister of yours is completely opposite to your personality. Originally, I wanted her to escape unscathed, but she insisted on getting involved. She said she was afraid. You are still worried about her, so you would rather take the initiative to cooperate with my plan. The daughter of the Hua family has been a doctor since she was a child, and the poison in the porcelain bottle cannot be concealed from the heavenly decree. Fan Qinjiao looked at Tianyu squatting under the low wall, feeling warm and sour in his heart. Her sister has really grown up and knows how to protect her as a sister. A figure came into sight again, and Fan Qinjiao's body tensed up. I saw the maidservant who had gone there come back, accompanied by the expected Princess Yunnan. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 246. Chapter 246, You don't deserve sympathy if you reap the consequences. The dispute between King Rui and the Hua family has long since ended with the death of King Rui. Fan Qinjiao has never been kind to a woman, nor has he been cruel to the whole family. But today's Princess Yunnan has stepped on her bottom line, leaving Fan Qinjiao unable to bear it. Regardless of Princess Yunnan's reason for joining forces with Bailey Rongs, she should not plan to use Tianyu's reputation as a bet. Even if Tianyu does marry Xianbei in the end, she will be burdened with a lifetime of infidelity. Clean reputation. How can such a vicious method not be outrageous? Under Fan Qinjiao's watchful eye, the maid has successfully introduced Princess Yunnan, who was coming to catch the traitor, into the wooden house. There was no movement in the wooden house. It was obvious that Princess Yunnan had also been drugged and passed out. Xiaoxian came from the darkness, stood by the window and said, after a stick of incense, the king of Xianbei will pretend that the third prince of Xianbei has not returned, as planned with the third prince of Xianbei, and bring him with him. People are searching wildly in Zhou Mansion. Normally speaking, the vassal king would eventually lead his people to find the wooden house and catch Tianyu and Lu to do it. But now, the vassal king will take away the personal stolen goods of Princess Yunnan and Lu Gan. In other words, things have been successful up to this point. Whether it is Fan Qinjiao or Bailey Fengming, they can stand aside and wait to see how the situation develops. I want to go to the wooden house, Fan Qinjiao suddenly said. Xiaoxian was stunned. Is his explanation just not specific, comprehensive, and objective enough? The feudal lord will bring his people to find him soon. No matter what Miss Qinjiao wants to do, I'm afraid it will be too late. Xiaoxian tried to dissuade her. Fan Qinjiao was indifferent. You take Xiaoxi and go first, I will come later. Today's affairs, whether it is the person in the palace, Bailey Rongs, or the owner of Yunnan County, undoubtedly does not want to join the Huajia foot. How could she deserve the respect of these people if she didn't do something? What she said? There is no way to give up today, only to fight to the death. But Xiaoxian wanted to say this, but Bailey Fengming raised his hand to stop him. Send the fourth lady of the Hua family back first. Xiaoxian. Your Highness, is it really okay for you to spoil your wife so much? You're probably forgetting that your daughter-in-law hasn't come to the house yet, are you? Xiao Xian did not dare to disobey the prince's order. He flew and landed in front of Tianyu. He didn't even give Tianyu a chance to ask. He just pulled Tianyu and leaped into the distance again. Fan Qinjiao poured 2 pills into his palm in advance, took one himself, and handed another one to Bailey Fengming. Bailey Fengming didn't even hesitate and raised his head in submission. In the wooden house, Lu Gan and Princess Yunnan fell to the left and right, unconscious. Bailey Fengming, who already understood what Fan Qinjiao wanted to do, walked into the house first, picked up Lu Gan and placed him on the wooden bed next to him. Fan Qinjiao walked directly in front of Princess Yunnan and ripped off Princess Yunnan's clothes. Tear, a sound. Bailey Fengming, who originally wanted to turn around, stopped again. Fan Qinjiao took out the needle bag he carried with him from his pocket, held the needle with one hand, and quickly inserted the silver needle into several acupuncture points under Princess Yunnan's ribs. Princess Yunnan, who was originally in a deep sleep, frowned and became conscious. Fan Qinjiao took out a few longer silver needles from the needle bag, and then inserted them into the acupuncture points at the joints of Princess Yunnan's limbs. The silver needles rotated slightly, and blood slowly flowed along the needle holes. Oozing. At this moment, Princess Yunnan had completely woken up. She opened her eyes suddenly, and when she saw Fan Qinjiao squatting in front of her, her black and white pupils were trembling. Princess Yunnan naturally hated the Hua family deeply. Whether it is her father or her brother, as long as they are involved in the Hua family, they will not end well. She has been dormant in secret, just to find an opportunity to take revenge. Finally, she arrived at Bailey Rongs. Bailey Rongs told her that if she wanted to make Fan Qinjiao miserable, she would have to marry a girl from the Hua family into Xianbei. Princess Yunnan followed Bailey Rongs' instructions, but the result. Why is she the one who falls here now? Fan Qinjiao took in Princess Yunnan's shock and asked, "Are you surprised?" Princess Yunnan subconsciously wanted to get up, but found that she couldn't move at all. Fan Qinjiao, what do you want to do? Fan Qinjiao looked calm, but I don't want to explain. Princess Yunnan's throat was rolling, she was gritting her teeth, and she wanted to stand up again, but out of the corner of her eye she suddenly saw Bailey Fengming and, standing with their backs to each other, Lu Gan. An ominous premonition suddenly enveloped Princess Yunnan. Fan Qinjiao, you can't do this to me. I am Princess Yunnan. If you dare to frame me, my mother will not let you go. I will also tell the emperor that everything is your instigation. Princess Yunnan was so frightened that she burst into tears. She didn't want to marry Xianbei, she didn't want it. Princess Yunnan, do you think Prince Rui's mansion still has the ability to help you? Princess Yunnan had a lump in her throat. Fan Qinjiao pulled out the silver needles from Princess Yunnan one by one. Since you know that no one will come forward, you should keep to yourself. Instead of wasting your time with me here, Princess Yunnan might as well save some energy and think carefully, think about how to face the attention of everyone. The plan failed, and Princess Yunnan became a chess piece. Whether it was the person in the palace or Bailey Rongs, how could he care about what Princess Yunnan said? There's only one place left that I haven't searched for yet. You guys, hurry up and make sure that the third prince of Xianbei is safe and sound. Zhou Chun's voice rang in the distance. I'm afraid that if you are by his side now, there will be no one left. Follow a group of people attending the banquet. Princess Yunnan cried like crazy, Fan Qinjiao, I was wrong, I was really wrong, please forgive me. Fan Qinjiao stood up slowly, with cold black eyes. Congratulations to Princess Yunnan for becoming the third princess of Xianbei. It was Bailey Fengming who was listening attentively and noticed that the visitor had entered the yard. He quickly stretched out his arms and hugged Fan Qinjiao's waist, tiptoeing towards the back window of the wooden house. The courtyard was already densely packed with people. Bailey Rongs heard the noise in the wooden house and curled his lips as if he was sure of victory, fearing that it would be done. The feudal king secretly looked at Bailey Rongs, and when he saw Bailey Rongs nodded slightly, he strode towards the wooden house. Princess Yunnan in the wooden house listened to the approaching footsteps and bit her lip. As long as she kept silent, she would be fine. Anyway, the person who came in would definitely be the third prince of Xianbei. When the time came, as long as this matter is covered up, no one will know everything about today. Thinking of this, Princess Yunnan even held her breath. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a giant python emerged from the corner of the wall. Its arm-thick core stretched and contracted, and its water tank-like snake body was so huge that it made people feel numb. Princess Yunnan's face turned pale and she was scared to death. Seeing the python swimming towards her direction, Princess Yunnan instinctively wanted to get up and scream. Ah! A heart-piercing scream suddenly exploded from the wooden house. Everyone in the courtyard was trembling with fright, and even the vassal king, who knew it well, took a step back in fright. But just like that, the people in the yard stared at the wooden house even more, especially Zhou Chun and Zhou Ningxi, with expressions of disbelief on their faces. Bailey Rongs curled his lips secretly, and had already thought about how he would behave to highlight his shock when the vassal king broke in. The secret guards deployed were already waiting outside the house, and as long as he exclaimed with one sound, the news about the fourth girl of the Hua family and the third prince of Xianbei would spread throughout the main city in an instant. As the feudal king opened the wooden door, he saw a disheveled figure running out. Just looking at the man's face, Bailey Rongs, who was already ready to exclaim, was stunned as if he had been struck by lightning. Princess Yunnan? Why was she the one who ran out of it? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 247. Chapter 247, The Other Way Around is a Mouthful. The appearance of Princess Yunnan can be said to have shocked everyone's eyes. When everyone looked towards the room where the wooden door had been knocked open, they happened to see the unconscious third prince of Xianbei again. This time, the vassal king deliberately made the disappearance of the third prince of Xianbei a big deal in order to catch the head of Rong'an County alone and seize the stolen goods. Now all the guests attending the banquet had followed. The vassal king was sweating anxiously. Facing those pairs of wide-open eyes, I don't know which eye to cover first. In the yard, Princess Yunnan shouted as if she was mad, Don't come here, snake, there is a snake. Snake. Where are the snakes? In the eyes of everyone, this is just an excuse made by Princess Yunnan for herself. Especially when the other princesses saw this, the disgust in their eyes should not be too obvious. He kept saying how bad Xianbei was, but in the end, he was having an affair with the third prince of Xianbei behind everyone's back. Now that he was caught and both took away the stolen goods, he started pretending to be crazy when he lost his face to others. Bah! It's really shameless. Tianyu, who was standing not far away, saw this and quietly walked to his third sister, how did you do it? The governor vessel is supplemented by the Sanjiao meridian, and the lily at the point where the pulse Qi converges is the main one. It also contains yin in the yang, so it can access the yin and yang veins and connect the meridian points all over the body. In this way, yin and yang conflict, and the lack of qi will cause people to the mind is disturbed and turns into a nightmare. And when they mistakenly believe that everything they see is real, the blood of the person who is hallucinating will flow back and open all his acupuncture points, so even if Princess Yunnan wants to hide in it, it is impossible to remain silent. In this calculation of Tianyu marriage and Tianyu, how many people actually extended their hands? She was just going to slap someone in the face. Want to put things to rest? Non-existent. Now Princess Yunnan appears in front of everyone disheveled, and the third prince of Xianbei is also exposed to the public. No matter how much Bailey Rongs wants to cover it up, he is afraid that he is unable to do so. and Bailey Rong's failure will soon spread throughout the streets and alleys of the main city. This incident happened in Xianbei. No matter whose fault it was, if the person in the palace didn't take the opportunity to express his position, how could he stop everyone from talking about it? And once Ziliang continues to put pressure on Xianbei will definitely be ready to rebound. Such a cause and effect is enough to cause headaches for those who want to reap the benefits, and live in panic. They will worry about Xianbei's secret attacks every day and every moment of the year. As for Bailey Rongs, he will definitely be angered and ignored by the emperor. And Princess Yunnan. The only way left before her was to marry Xianbei. Let's go. Fan Qinjiao restrained the sharpness in his eyes, turned around and left with Tianyu. Now that you know everything, it would be a waste of time to continue standing here. Tianyu followed Fan Qinjiao all the way out of the Zhou family's mansion, only to see Xiaoxian making a U-turn on the carriage. It was Bailey Fengming who was sitting in the carriage and showed a polite smile when he saw Fan Qinjiao and Tianyu. I will add fuel to the fermentation of this matter, and I will not let Ayao down. Once this matter was brought to the attention of his father, even if he could not completely disappoint him, it would at least make him ignore him for a period of time. The so-called disappointment is caused by the superposition of countless neglects. Fan Qinjiao also understood that defeating Bailey Rongs did not happen overnight, and there was concubine Yu behind him. This is your highness, Prince Yalao. Fan Qinjiao's voice was light and distant, but the same words had a different effect in Tianyu's ears. Especially when I saw the dignified crown prince being so gentle to my third sister, I was still wondering why the crown prince would save me, but I was suddenly enlightened. My dear mother. Her third sister and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince are actually in love with each other. Although Tianyu feels a little pity for Jiyu's, who has a crush on his third sister, but who told her third sister to have good taste. The prince has an extraordinary appearance and elegant demeanor. Jiyu's, who originally looked like a middle-aged man, stopped there with His Highness. Before even comparing, the gap is revealed. If the third sister of her family really marries the prince, will she be the crown prince and the future queen? My God! The more he thought about it, the more excited Tianyu became. He couldn't help but said "Pht," and snickered. Fan Qinjiao felt a headache when he looked at Tianyu's wicked smile. He bent his knees towards Bailey Fengming and said, "Goodbye." Bailey Fengming nodded with a smile, "Go." It was Tianyu who was stuffed into the carriage by his third sister. In line with his enthusiasm for his future brother-in-law, he did not forget to wave to Bailey Fengming familiarly, "Well, Your Highness, please go slowly. Come to the house when you have time as a guest, we in the Hua family will treat you with courtesy and give you a warm welcome." Bailey Fengming smiled and said, "Okay." On the carriage, Tianyu felt excited no matter what he thought about. His eyes stared at the face of his third sister endlessly. Fan Qinjiao raised his hand and patted her on the forehead, telling her, "Don't let anything happen today." Tianyu hugged the third sister's arm and nodded, "Don't worry, third sister, I've grown up and I know how to behave." Fan Qinjiao curled his lips fondly as he thought about Tianyu's bravery and responsibility today. Once this incident breaks out, the marriage between Xianbei and Ziliang will inevitably be put on the agenda. The man in the palace has always done a good job in appearance and will definitely hold a farewell banquet before Xianbei leaves. So, what happened today was an accident, but it was also an opportunity. Fan Qinjiao originally wanted to do some tricks in the team accompanying Xianbei so that he could pass by Huaishang and meet his uncles smoothly, but now it seems that it is a matter of course and everything is in order. What she has to do now is to watch the development of the situation with a cold eye. In Zhou's mansion, the doorman came in a hurry, stood beside Zhou Chun and said softly, "Sir, Princess Jingping said that when she came back, she heard something happen to the Zhou family, and was worried that her sister-in-law would be frightened without warning, so she took her first. The Lord of Rong'an County has returned." Zhou Chun nodded, "This is not a good thing, just leave." Hearing these words, Bailey Rong swayed and almost lost his balance. The Lord of Rongan County is gone. Fan Kinjao is also gone. Why does she escape unharmed every time something happens? Bailey Rongs had a splitting headache looking at the mess all over the courtyard. If Princess Yunnan had never shown up, he might have been able to conceal the matter, but now, under the gaze of so many eyes, even if he tried his best, he could no longer turn things around. Suppressing the anger boiling in his heart, Bailey Rongs could only close his eyes resignedly. When he opened them again, he looked at the feudal king coldly. Today, my father set up a plan for the third prince of Xianbei, the marriage banquet, but I never thought that the third prince of Xianbei would be so impatient. In this case, I will go to the palace to report to my father the secret relationship between the third prince of Xianbei and Princess Yunnan. The vassal king gritted his teeth and glared at Bailey Rongs. He knew that the three princes of Ziliang were going to fly away when the disaster came, but thinking that it would not be easy to cause trouble now that the evidence was conclusive, he could only delay and said, I am really surprised by what happened today. All the truth can only be known after His Highness wakes up. Bailey Rongs wanted to clear up the relationship in a hurry, but he didn't want to really offend Xianbei. Lu Gan is ruthless and ambitious. If he can really unify Xianbei in the future, he will undoubtedly be a big help to him. One hand suddenly grasped the hem of Bailey Rong's robe. Princess Yunnan, who had regained consciousness, seemed to be grasping the last life-saving straw, crying desperately, it's not like this. Today was supposed to be. What does it have to do with the fact that the Lord of Rongan County was arrested? Your Highness, you must not ignore me. Bailey Rongs clenched his fists under his sleeves, wishing he could knock Princess Yunnan unconscious with one punch. The thought of marrying Xianbei made Princess Yunnan want to die. Now she is threatening Bailey Rongs like crazy and howling, Third Highness, don't forget what you promised me back then. He said that as long as I help you seduce Princess Rongan, everything will go smoothly. When Princess Rongan marries Xianbei, the Hua family will be like cutting off their own arms. People in the courtyard were shocked when they heard these words. In order to achieve his own goals, he even did not hesitate to frame an innocent woman's innocence. If what Princess Yunnan said is true, then His Highness is a bit too cruel, right? End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 248. Chapter 248, Playing with the Palm of Your Hand. Bailey Rongs looked panicked and immediately ordered, come here. Stop this crazy woman's mouth quickly. The guards swarmed up and took Princess Yunnan under control in an instant. Princess Yunnan was completely collapsed, but she was still struggling desperately. Even though her mouth was tightly covered by several hands, she still stared at Bailey Rongs and shouted aha! Desperately. Zhou Chun looked at the controlled Princess Yunnan, then at the third prince who looked livid, and then at the Xianbei vassal king who looked as if he had been struck by lightning. Suddenly I wasn't surprised anymore. I feel that everything is so natural. He just said, this Princess Yunnan has no appearance but no identity. How could the third prince of Xianbei, such a shrewd person, like Princess Yunnan? It turned out that they were just a group of ambitious people who wanted to join forces to deal with the Hua family. However, the plan failed and instead they were knocked upside down by the basin they lifted. Zhou Chun has a deep understanding of Fan Qinjiao's power. He has forced the palace gates from above and irritated the courtiers from below. A group of people who were born with silver spoons in their mouths and have never suffered at all want to plot against Fan Qinjiao. It's not like lighting a lantern in the toilet to seek death. Princess Yunnan's mouth was gagged, but everyone's eyes were still staring at Bailey Rongs like needles, and the seams in her bones were aching. A palace official hurriedly ran to Bailey Rongs and said, Your Highness, the Emperor has summoned you to enter the palace quickly to give advice. Bailey Rongs' heart tightened, but he couldn't think too much about the current situation. He nodded and followed the palace servants towards the Zhou family's door. Seeing that Bailey Rongs had left, The vassal king quickly called to his followers, carried out the unconscious Lu Gan, and followed Bailey Rongs. Seeing this, the other official ladies in the courtyard also turned and left. Not long after, the Zhou family finally became quiet. Zhou Chun was just standing at the door of his mansion, but he was always holding his breath. Zhou Ningxi took the initiative to ask, "How does father plan to deal with today's affairs?" Zhou Chun lowered his voice and said, "This matter is so complicated that our small Zhou family can't get involved." This was done during the marriage between the two countries. He did not believe that the third prince had such courage. Unless this matter is approved by the emperor. If this is really the case, Fan Qinjiao is really too courageous to trade peaches for plums, steel dragons for phoenixes. How is this different from breaking ground on Tai Sui's head? Zhou Chun took his daughter and warned him, "Just pretend that you don't know anything about today's events, but remember, if Xianbei and Ziliang can really get married smoothly this time, you will definitely see Princess Jingping in the future. Be polite, and even if you cannot become friends, you must never become enemies." The queen visited the Zhou mansion in person a few days ago, so to speak. If Fan Qinjiao can really withdraw from this matter, he will probably have to find a way to show his surrender in the future. As soon as Bailey Rongs returned to the palace, he rushed to the imperial study room without stopping. As soon as he entered the courtyard, he saw Bailey Fengming, who had just walked out of the imperial study room. Bailey Rongs' heart tightened, and he walked up to Bailey Fengming pretending to be concerned. "I didn't see the prince at Zhou's house just now, but my father summoned the prince to the palace for questioning." Bailey Fengming's face turned pale, and his voice seemed to be trembling a little. "Today something happened suddenly, and I have told your father everything truthfully. If you want to add fuel to the flames, inciting your father's anger is the most important thing." Bailey Rongs felt dizzy in front of his eyes, but he could only bravely walk into the imperial study room. In the imperial study room, Yang Changdi's whole face seemed to be shrouded in dark clouds. As soon as he saw Bailey Rongs, he threw the teacup in his hand out. "Evil! Look at the good things you have done." If Bailey Rongs hadn't promised that he would be able to get this matter done, he would never have turned a blind eye. As long as a girl from the Hua family married Xianbei, she would not only be selling Xianbei a favor, but she could also take advantage of the opportunity. Lives in Fan Qinjiao. Emperor Yongchang even thought about how to use Fan Qinjiao to make money for himself in the future. Result: just show him this. Bailey Rongs knelt on the ground with weak legs. "Father, this matter was also unexpected by me, and I was also deeply affected by it. Father, you must never listen to other people's slander and unjustly accuse me." Ah! Emperor Yongchang's hands were shaking while holding the bookcase. The prince has never experienced this before, and it is inevitable that he will not make a choice when encountering things. But even if he is in a panic, the first thing he thinks of is to report to me, and then look at you. So ambitious, I don't know. The sky is the limit. Not only do you not know what you did wrong, but you also slandered the prince in front of me. Bailey Rongs trembled all over, tears welling up in his eyes because of fright. "I know my mistake, I really know my mistake. All plans were carried out according to the plan, and I don't know why it has become like this. Father, please calm down, calm down." Emperor Yongchang gave Bailey Rongs a headache as he shouted, "Come here, throw the third prince out." Bai Tu, who was waiting outside, opened the door of the imperial study and hurried in with his guards. Bailey Rongs was dragged into a big shape by the guards in embarrassment, but he was still pleading, "Father, please listen to my explanation. That Fan Qinjiao was too insidious and cunning. When the incident happened, Fan Qingyao has already escaped with the Lord of Rong'an County, and even if I try to make amends, I can't make it back." Bailey Rongs was dragged out of the imperial study, leaving only his hoarse cries lingering in the yard. Bai Tu was afraid that the emperor would be angered if the noise continued, so he hurriedly shouted, a few more people will come and send the third prince to Yuya Palace for the time being. The guards who were escorting Princess Yunnan to the side heard this and hurriedly stepped forward to help. Emperor Yongchang was sitting on the dragon throne, so angry that his chest hurt, and his chest kept rising and falling. Bailey Rong's voice has disappeared in the courtyard, but the last words Bailey Rong said in Emperor Yongchang's ears are always recalling. Whether it was the Hua family being questioned or the Hyuguo temple incident, Fan Qingjao seemed to be able to escape unscathed. Although Fan Qingjao had enough evidence to exonerate himself every time, he seemed to be a little too lucky when he counted it down. Emperor Yongchang was able to sit on this chair, knowing that God would never favor him. Thinking about it carefully, although he found a way to deal with the Hua family has never fallen. Even now, the people in the main city still remember the good things of the Hua family. The gratitude of the people gradually fell from a flower family to Fan Qingjao. Disguise yourself, stay dormant and forbearing, but secretly work every step of the way, all your traps are exhausted. If everything is true, it means that even he is being played by Fan Qingjao. Emperor Yongchang squeezed the armrest on the side of his body, slowly opened his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Someone, go find the prince." Not long after, the phoenix singing over 100 miles left and came back. In the quiet imperial study room, one could only hear the gloomy voice of Emperor Yongchang intermittently. Bailey Fengming lowered his head and remained silent, his long eyelashes covering all the thoughts in his eyes. Not long after, the sound of Bailey Fengming sounded in the imperial study room. But it is as simple as just a few words, "My son and I obey my orders." Emperor Yongchang looked at Bailey Fengming with a gloomy look and said, "Since this matter has been entrusted to you, you can handle it with confidence and boldness. No matter what happens, I will take care of you. No matter how old I am, I will take care of you now. When you come back from Xianbei, I will hand over all the records of the third-rank ministers to you for review." Bailey Fengming seemed to be extremely grateful, and immediately knelt on the ground and kowtowed, "My son, I will definitely live up to my father's high expectations." Emperor Yongchang nodded with satisfaction. In this way, he is a puppet he can control with confidence. Outside the royal study, Princess Yunnan, who was standing alone at the door, covered her mouth in surprise. She originally wanted to take advantage of Baitu and others to send the third prince to Yuya Palace to intercede with the emperor, but hearing the sound of footsteps approaching the door, Princess Yunnan hurriedly hid in a corner. Looking at Bailey Fengming leaving alone, and thinking about the conversation in the imperial study just now, Princess Yunnan's lips suddenly evoked a sinister smile. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 249. Chapter 249, Pushing Oneself to a Dead End. 3 days later, Emperor Yongchang issued an imperial edict. I am very pleased to hear that Princess Yunnan, the only daughter of King Rui, is skillful and generous, gentle and honest, and has outstanding appearance. I am very pleased to hear that the third son of the Ziliang Emperor is gentle in nature and has both talent and appearance. He should choose a virtuous daughter as his wife. Princess Yunnan is waiting in the boudoir, and she and the third son of the Xianbei Emperor are a match made in heaven and earth. In order to become a beautiful woman, you are specially betrothed to the third son of the Xianbei Emperor as the prince's concubine. In the national friendship, all etiquette is left to Li Xianbei to take care of it, and I hope to choose a good time to get married. For a time, the people in the main city were excited. If Xianbei really marries Ziliang this time, Xianbei will not fight Ziliang again. Princess Yunnan, who had been crying in the palace for several days, fainted when she heard the imperial edict. A few days ago, she rushed to the Hua family to ridicule Princess Rui, who had all the members of the Hua family dead. This time, she couldn't even cry. She sat upright on the chair, her eyes were gray and distracted, and she just felt that the sky was all over the place. Then it collapsed. The son was executed, and now the daughter is married to Ziliang. Princess Rui suddenly ordered the nanny beside her, "Quick, get someone to prepare the carriage." As soon as Ning'an received the news, she ran to Fan Qinjiao and said, "Miss, the number of people to the third prince of Xianbei and Princess Yunnan has been decided. To show our sincerity, Ziliang, on May 10th, send His Highness the Crown Prince to personally lead 1,000 elite soldiers to Xianbei, just. Fan Qinjiao raised his head slightly from the book, "Just what?" Ning'an bit her lip. "It's just that the imperial edict also said that the imperial doctors at the imperial hospital are all men and cannot accompany Princess Yunnan to take care of her, so the emperor ordered the young lady to take care of her." Fan Qinjiao rubbed the teacup in his hand, his dark eyes as dark as water. What should come has finally come. In this way, she can meet her uncles, but the prerequisite is that she must. "Grandma," he stepped through the door and said, "Miss Qinjiao, the old lady asks you to go to the main courtyard." Fan Qinjiao stood up knowingly. This time, her inner calculation seemed to be a matter of course, but in fact it was a desperate act. Even if she could hide it from her mother, she could not hide it from her grandfather and grandfather. In the palace, after concubine Yu heard the imperial edict, she sent someone to call Bailey Rongs into the palace. Bailey Rongs walked into Yuya Palace with a gloomy face. "I wonder what the urgent matter is for the mother and concubine to call me here." Concubine Yu waved her hand and signaled everyone in the palace to retreat. "Have you heard of the emperor's imperial edict?" Bailey Rongs became even more depressed when he heard the imperial edict. If the mother and concubine want to scold her son for not living up to expectations, then forget it. My son has already reflected on himself in the house these days. That day Bailey Rongs was escorted to Yuya Palace by Tuesday. After hearing the cause and effect of the incident, concubine Yu slapped him in anger. Bailey Rongs knew in his heart that he had done something wrong this time. He had been ignored by his father, and now he couldn't get the slightest comfort from his mother and concubine, so he felt uncomfortable. Concubine Yu looked at her decadent son and her voice became stern again. "It's just a slap in the face. Are you going to back down and give up? How have I taught you since you were a child? You have to look at both sides of everything. Same thing. It is the most foolish thing to look at one side of things." Concubine Yu felt distressed when she looked at Bailey Rongs' still red and swollen cheeks. She walked to her son and sat down. Fan Qinjiao escaped several times. "Do you really think that she is lucky? What if there are really so many people in the world? For those who are lucky, others don't need to fight for it." Bailey Rongs was stunned. "What does the mother-in-law mean?" "I can think clearly about this matter, and your father must be able to see through it, otherwise your father would not leave so many imperial doctors in the palace unused, and let Fan Qinjiao accompany him." Bailey Rongs was so shocked that he said, "Did the mother-in-law mean that?" Concubine Yu nodded. "Since you understand, there is no need for me to talk nonsense. As long as our goal can be achieved, it doesn't matter whether you go to Xianbei or not this time. As long as the stumbling blocks that need to be removed are removed. As for your father, slowly just coax him. Don't forget, you are the only prince who was raised by your father." Bailey Rongs was in a state of enlightenment as he listened to concubine Yu's instructions. Without further ado, Bailey Rongs left Yuya Palace and headed to Jiyazai. When the vassal king heard that the third prince of Ziliang was coming, he did not intend to meet him. Instead, Lu Gan said to the guard, "Please come in." The vassal king looked at Lu Gan in disbelief. Does the third prince still trust this person? If it were not for the incompetence of the third prince of Ziliang, Xianbei would not be led by the nose by Ziliang now. The collegial ministers of Ziliang even took another piece of fat from Xianbei on the grounds that Xianbei did not respect Ziliang. If he were not standing on the border of Ziliang now, the vassal king would have turned against him long ago. Believe it or not, there is no choice. When Lugan thought of the shame at the marriage banquet, his face turned blue with hatred. With such a strong medicinal effect, even now Lugan's limbs are still weak. How could he, who had tasted Fan Kinjao's cartilage powder, not know the source of this drug? This is the first time Lu has been defeated by the same person twice in a row. Fan Kinjao. When he thought of these three words, Lugan wanted to peel them off and bone them. But if he wanted to take Fan Kinjao's life, he could only join forces with Bailey Rongs. Bailey Rongs stepped in and looked at the stern eyes of Lugan, who was slumped on the soft couch. He knew that this person had followed him to the place he wanted to go. I have a way to relieve the third prince of Xianbei's heart. I wonder if the third prince of Xianbei would like to hear it? Lugan looked at Bailey Rongs, who also had a sinister light in his eyes, and curled his lips tacitly. The third prince of Ziliang, it doesn't matter, I am willing to listen attentively. The mansion in the western suburbs. In the main room, as soon as Tao Yuxian saw Fan Kinjao come in, even and he stepped out. With red eyes, he pulled his granddaughter to his side. He looked at the hidden face and the trembling lips with desire. He stopped talking. Fan Kinjao knew that his grandmother knew everything with her expression, so he comforted her in a low voice, "Grandma, there is no need to worry, Kinjao will be extremely careful." Hua Yaoding, who was sitting aside, heard this and dropped the teacup in his hand to the ground. Click, there was a crisp sound, and the colorful glazed Yanglian teacup shattered all over the floor. Fan Kinjao quickly knelt on the ground, lowered his head and said, "Grandpa must not let his anger ruin his body." Hua Yaoding looked at her granddaughter kneeling in front of her and was so angry that she raised her calloused hands several times. Tao Yuxian hurriedly held her husband's arm. "Can't you please speak carefully if you have something to say?" Hua Yaoding broke away from Tao Yuxian's pull and said, "Why have you become so kind to a woman now? How can you talk about this matter of life and death?" He was very pleased and even more fortunate that Xiao Kinjao could return safely with Tianyu. But he never thought that Xiao Kinjao would use such extreme means. The main city has been peaceful for several days. Hua Yaoding was still able to deceive himself that the matter might not be as serious as he thought. But today the imperial edict was issued, how could he deceive himself and others? "Xiao Kinjao, with your cleverness and the city government, you could have escaped smoothly with Tianyu, but why did you insist on making this matter known to the whole city? Don't say you didn't know that this action would cause what?" Fan Kinjao knelt on the ground, his raised eyes were crystal clear. "I know." Hua Yaoding was so angry that he almost jumped up from his chair. Tao Yuxian held her husband's arm again and turned to look at Fan Kinjao. "Why do you do this if you know it?" Fan Kinjao's waist was straight, his dark eyes were firm and showed no regrets or flinching. "Only in this way, no one will use the Hua family as a soft persimmon. Only in this way will all those who plot against the Hua family think twice before they act. And only in this way only then can I meet my uncles naturally." Tao Yuxian's tears just flowed out. Xiao Kinjao's heart has been full of everything about the Hua family from beginning to end. Hua Yaoding was so angry that his veins popped out, "But you have also driven yourself to a dead end." End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 250. Chapter 250, No Way Back. The marriage banquet was originally set up for heaven's decree. No matter how many twists and turns there were, without the emperor's secret permission, no one would have the guts to make a big move in the marriage between Ziliang and Xianbei. It would be fine if Fan Kinjao unknowingly took Tianyu away from right and wrong, but Fan Kinjao just brought this matter to the forefront. Princess Yunnan was hit in the face. The Xianbei people were beaten in the face. How can the emperor avoid being slapped in the face? Hua Yaoding has been with Emperor Yongchang for decades, and has long seen through his inner darkness, sensitivity, and suspicion. This matter has become so unresolved, How could the emperor not see anything? I'm afraid that asking Fan Kinjao to accompany him this time is a lie, but it's true that he wants to find a reason to eliminate Fan Kinjao's future troubles. The imperial court ordered mining to be opened in Huaishang. If the uncles who have just experienced life and death want to avoid attracting the attention of the imperial court, they have to be like thieves and survive under the eyes of the imperial court. There are indeed many ways to get involved, but the way to go to Huaishang to see your uncles as soon as possible is not to be missed. Fan Kinjao always thinks of his uncles who have worked hard for Ziliang for half their lives, but ended up like this. I hated it so much that my heart ached and my limbs felt cold. How come a man from the Hua family has to live under the fence of the imperial court even if he does? Hua Yaoding's eyes were red and his whole body was trembling slightly. He closed his eyes to suppress the disordered breath. Of course he understands that his son's life is not easy, but he also doesn't want to lose anyone from the Hua family. This trip is so vicious and sinister. Since the emperor is suspicious, he will definitely murder you. How do you know, Xiao Kinjao, that you will be able to see your uncle safely? Tao Yuxian burst into tears, and was so distressed that he couldn't even breathe. All burned. Fan Kinjao gritted his teeth and his eyes were as bright as a torch. The road ahead is uncertain and dangerous. Only when you take steps do you know that the dangers are extremely dangerous. But if you keep standing still, you will gain nothing. If you want to get something, you have to give something. This is my grandmother Shi Chang has taught me that no matter what lies ahead, I am willing to move forward bravely. Go forward and retreat with the Hua family. Tao Yuxian trembled all over and burst into tears. She knew that Xiao Kinjao had made up her mind, and she also knew that Xiao Kinjao was determined to take up the Hua family. Hua Yaoding suddenly opened his eyes, stood up and walked towards Fan Kinjao. Tao Yuxian was so frightened that he hurriedly stood up to stop him. Master, no matter how much you blame me, it won't help. Besides, Xiao Kinjao risked his life this time all for the sake of the Hua family. Hua Yaoding seemed not to have heard Tao Yuxian's words, his eyes were calm and gloomy without anger. He pushed away Tao Yuxian's hand that was tightly clenched on his arm, and then took a few steps forward to stand in front of Fan Kinjao. Fan Kinjao raised his head and stared at his grandfather who stood in front of him like a mountain. His eyes were hot and his pupils were trembling slightly. In the previous life, all the men of the Hua family were executed, but no whole bodies were found. The female members of the Hua family were displaced and humiliated for half their lives. Such a scene was clearly visible as if it happened yesterday. Every time she thought of it, her heart was twisted like a knife, and her whole body was shaking with pain like fire eroding her bones. Grandfather, Kinjao doesn't ask for anything else, but that the Hua family can have a place in this troubled world. I hope that the Hua family can wash away their humiliation and be full of glory. Before he finished speaking, his thin body was suddenly held tightly in a hot embrace. Hua Yaoding's eyes were filled with tears, and his usually majestic face was now full of relief and sadness. The matter is now over, and the Hua family will face it with you, but Xiao Kinjao, you have to remember that no matter what happens, the first thing you have to protect is your own life. The Hua family, having a woman like this is the Hua family's greatest honor. Fan Kinjao was startled, and his heart couldn't help feeling swollen and sore. My grandson will remember it. Hua Yuelian heard that her daughter was about to go to Xianbei, and she felt uneasy. However, she didn't expect that as soon as she walked into the courtyard, she saw a smiling face rushing towards her. Aunt Smiley lowered her head and stopped. Hua Yulian saw something was wrong with Xiao Yan, but before she could ask, Xiao Yan ran away. Fan Kinjao walked out of the house and saw his mother standing in a daze at the entrance of the yard. Looking at her mother's thin back, Fan Kinjao's eyes were filled with sourness. She walked over and took her mother's arm, coaxing softly, "My daughter will leave with her the day after tomorrow. Mother will come today to see her off. Is it too early for my daughter to leave?" Hua Yulian turned her head following the sound, looking at her daughter's face that was deliberately trying to please but with a guilty conscience, and her heart ached. But no one dared to disobey the emperor's will, so she could only persuade herself that Yu would just go and return. It's a long way to go to Xianbei, and you're traveling with the prince this time. You must not take it lightly. Hua Yuelian is a woman after all. She doesn't understand state affairs and world affairs. Just thinking about her daughter going out to suffer, she finally cried uncontrollably. Sound. Seeing this, Fan Qingjao hugged his mother's arm even tighter. Suddenly a doorman came to report, Princess Rui is outside the door asking to be seen. It is self-evident why Princess Rui came at this time. But Fan Qingjao had no intention of listening to her complaints and pleas. Go and tell Princess Rui that what she wants is beyond the Hua family's ability. The boy nodded, turned, and left. Although Hua Yuelian felt that Yu Ye's approach was too harsh, when she thought of the day when the Hua family man was in mourning, Princess Rui brought people to laugh at the Hua family's jokes, so she couldn't hold back her words. At this time, Princess Rui, who was sitting anxiously in the carriage, could not have imagined that she who once sat here and watched the Hua family lively, now had to sit here and beg the Hua family to let the emperor take back the imperial edict. Seeing that it was getting late, Fan Qingjao simply went to his mother's yard to have dinner with her. Although Fan Qingjao had a plan in mind for this trip to Huaishang, he did not dare to determine the success or failure until the last moment. Looking at his mother who was sitting across from him, who was constantly picking up food for him, Fan Qingjao kept suppressing the sourness in his eyes. She should remember her mother's current state well, so that if she really never comes back, she might as well leave her in her thoughts. At the last moment, Fan Qingjao got up and returned to his yard. This time Fan Qingjao went to Huaishang, but he really made everyone in the Hua family busy. The daughters-in-law of the Hua family moved everything they could think of, from clothes to supplies, to Fan Qingjiao's yard. When Fan Qingjao returned to the yard, he saw the various things piled up like hills. Plant supplies. Fan Qingjao understood the intention behind these things, and even though he didn't need them, he still asked Nanny Su to put them in the warehouse. Later, Fan Qingjao called everyone in the yard to him. After I leave, all matters in the yard will be decided by Aunt Su. Aunt Su is old and has a lot of experience. It is not difficult to build a yard. A few people nodded without any doubt. Nanny Su was older after all, so she always felt that the young lady's explanation was not quite right. After everyone left, she walked to Fan Qingjao and asked, "Little lady, are you hiding something?" Fan Qingjao smiled and said, "I am going to Huaishang this time. If I can't come back safely, I hope that Aunt Su can make good arrangements for the future of these people in the yard. If Ningtian and Lanja want to follow their grandfather, then so be it. They are, as for Ninggan, if there is a reasonably good family, it will be up to Nanny Su to make the decision." Fan Qingjao did not want to cause trouble to others, but there were too many unknowns in her trip to Xianbei, and even she was not sure whether she would be safe. So, she needs someone to help her give the people around her a good death. This is what she owed them in her previous life. Fan Qingjao held Grandma Su's rough big hand and said, "I'd better ask Grandma Su to keep this matter a secret for me." Nanny Su's eyes were red and she choked several times, "But, how can I hide this from the young lady? If the young lady finds out about the young lady, how will the young lady live in the future?" Fan Qingjao asked instead, "Mother Su, has Mr. Sun visited us in the past few days?" Mrs. Fan Qingjao felt bitter in his heart. If he was really unhappy, how could he allow Sun Che to visit again and again? After walking around the desk, Fan Qingjao wrote down a letter, then called Ninghan in and said, "Send this letter to your adoptive mother. Only when she sees that her mother has a home before she leaves can she really go on the road with peace of mind. Even if what awaits her will be a road with no return." When Ninggan went out with the letter, the candles in other courtyards were extinguished, but the fourth lady's courtyard was still brightly lit. At this time, Chun Yu, the second daughter-in-law, looked at the smiling face kneeling in front of her, her whole body tensed into a straight line, and her hands supporting the table trembled uncontrollably. "Have you really decided?" With a smile on his face, he kowtowed to his mother and said, "I would like to ask my mother to do it for me." Looking at her daughter, who was so stubborn that she didn't waver at all, the second daughter-in-law Chunyu nodded with tears in her eyes, "Since you have made up your mind, I can't stop you. As long as Mu Yan, you have to remember that if you can't do it this time, if you agree to what I said, even if you come back alive, I will break your legs." The smiling face's eyes were hot, and he knocked his head on the ground again. "Don't worry, mother, my daughter will definitely do what she says." End of this chapter.